Hey guys, welcome to Munro Live. My name is John, and what we do here at Munro is an engineering consulting firm. How do we do that? We do that through benchmarking, teardowns, cost optimization, and product optimization with a little bit of manufacturing optimization sprinkled in. Today, I have the honor of meeting with Rick Wilmer. He's the president and CEO of ChargePoint. So, Rick, can you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Well, great to be here, John. Thanks for having me. Cool to see this place. My background goes, I grew up in California in what is now known as Silicon Valley before it was Silicon Valley. When I was a kid, it was all agriculture. I went to public schools, went to college, got a degree in chemistry, and moved into technology and data storage, making disks for hard drives, which involved a lot of chemistry back in the day.
How long did you do that?
Did about 20 years, and
Okay.
I jumped between engineering roles and operations roles, lived in Asia, ran a manufacturing facility.
Okay.
Very difficult products to manufacture, high-speed mechanics, clean room environments, really challenging. And that industry became commoditized, so I made a conscious decision around the turn of the century to make a career shift into data networking, and worked for a number of companies in the data networking space, which had, again, complex hardware, interesting manufacturing challenges. And then that industry kind of went the same way. It consolidated. It became hard to emerge as a smaller startup company, which I always enjoyed doing, and made a choice to make a change once again. And actually did a food robotics company, strangely enough, in a CEO role, which we sold to DoorDash. And then after I spent a little time at DoorDash, an old friend of mine who was the CEO of ChargePoint at the time called me up and said, hey, we're in hyper-growth mode, back in late 2022, early 2023, and we need some help scaling up operations and some help with support as well. So I joined ChargePoint, not wanting to, quite honestly, do the CEO role again. Really enjoyed, the operating role, and really what resonated with, the part of the mission of ChargePoint, which is mitigating climate change. It's a very important cause to me. And, as I, end up on the backside of my career doing something that is good for the planet, that'll make this place better for, future generations, really resonated with me. So I joined as COO, and then in late 2023, after the whole EV kind of slowdown occurred, and the complications as a result of COVID started to clear up a little bit, the board decided to make a change and asked me to take on the CEO role. And I looked at my wife and said, sorry, honey, I'm doing it again. And here we are.
So you had your wife's blessing.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. You like the CEO role, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, with every job, there's stuff that's really fun and enjoyable, and there's other parts that, aren't so great that you have to do as part of the job. And this is just like that. It's got things that I really love doing and other things that are challenging.
So tell us a little bit about the company now that you're actually managing overall, ChargePoint.
Yeah, so when I took over, we put together a 3-year plan, which I've talked about in our earnings calls and other venues. And year one was really right-sizing the business, getting very tight and operating well across the board from an operating standpoint. Everything from quote to cash to supply chain to how we support our customers. We had a lot of room for improvement in many of those areas. And then reimagining the product roadmap because the industry was changing. So year one, quite frankly, was kind of painful, right? We let some people go. We had to reimagine the product roadmap. We put a lot of effort and pressure to get better operationally, and we succeeded getting that done in year one. Year two is really now about delivering all that innovation that we contrived in year one through that reimagined product roadmap and really starting to drive growth, right? So we've got now new products coming. We talked earlier about a replacement for our current home product coming here soon. We've announced it in Europe already. We've obviously announced a new DC architecture that, in my opinion, is game-changing. So now we're delivering on all this innovation, and the year three is when we really start to drive growth based on this whole new product portfolio and our strong position in the market.
Okay, so the first year of the first year was restructuring, second year was executing that, and then the third year is actually delivering the product to the customer.
Yeah, yeah.
So if you look at your overall business, how do you view the balance between home charging, workplace charging, and public DC fast charging?
Yeah, and I'd throw fleet charging in there as well. I think we're unique in that we serve all of those market/use cases.
Yes.
And I believe it's a competitive advantage. And I'll give you a good example. We go to a big telecom company that has technician vans and they want to electrify that fleet. Okay, this is a fleet electrification deal, simple, behind the fence overnight charging. So we do that. And then they said, well, some of our technicians, drive those vans from home because it's inefficient to have them come all the way into a central yard to pick up the van to go do their workday. So we need home chargers, and we need to reimburse them for the electricity that, they're using at home to fuel their work vehicle. So that happens. Then, hey, guess what? We want to put chargers in our workplace parking lots, to attract people that we want to employ to work here that drive EVs and are environmentally conscious. So now we're working on them with workplace. So you can see how you get into these big global 1,000 companies, in particular auto OEMs, but others as well, where they need all these use cases. They have a demand for every single one of them. And when you can provide a complete solution, and in many cases managed through a single pane of glass, you can deliver more value and simplify the way that company operates its charging compared to buying piecemeal solutions for home, commercial, DC, fleet, public, whatever the case may be.
Okay. How many people, after your restructuring, now work at your facility?
I think we're around 1,500 total, company-wide.
I think I read, too, where up to at least 100 EVs are in your parking lot at any given time, perhaps charging on your units?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, our parking lot is full of chargers and full of EVs and a lot of cool ones too, right? We do a lot of interop testing.
Okay.
And we see, new camouflage vehicles before they've been announced or debuted to the public, coming in stealth mode to interop test. So we get to see a lot of cool stuff.
Okay, that sounds good. By the way, do you see more EVs out here or less than you see out west?
You see more in California than I see here on the road in the Detroit area.
By order of magnitude?
Oh, boy. It's just so anecdotal, right? I'm cruising down the road in an Uber looking around, seeing how many EVs can I count.
Yeah.
Right? There's just, at where we work, almost everybody drives an EV, so I'm very biased. But
yes. Yeah,
I think just in general, the coastal states that, tend to have, more income, more, I guess, progressive thinking and commitments to climate change and mitigating climate change, that's where we've seen a lot of the adoption.
Okay.
With exceptions, right? Texas is a big, big place for EV adoption. So it varies through the country, with most of it being on the coast, but you do see exceptions in the middle of the country as well.
Okay, nice. So you have both hardware and software platforms. How important is the software in enabling reliability, payments, and driver experience?
It's critical. I mean, if you just do one or the other, you cannot do what we do. We can unlock so many interesting features and capabilities that our customers value by having both the hardware and the software. Now, it's not a proprietary stack. You can use our software to manage any other manufacturer's hardware that's OCPP compliant. But if you use our hardware, depending on what your needs and wants are out of your charging infrastructure, we can unlock capabilities that you can't get, just based on a standard off-the-shelf OCPP compliant software stack.
So then how do you approach interoperability with other charging networks? You just said it's not proprietary, so there's a sharing mechanism that you employ with other networks out there?
Yeah, so you can think about it in two ways. One, there's the charging management system software that is a ChargePoint operator. You're going to use that system to manage your chargers. Are they working? Is the pricing what it's supposed to be? What's the utilization? Am I monitoring faults? Whatever the case may be. Then you've got the EMSP software. So think about the CMS as the relationship with the chargers. And then the EMSP is the relationship with the drivers, right? So we have the ChargePoint app, which is in e-mobility. We're an e-mobility service provider where you as a driver can download our app and access charging. As an EMSP, I want to make the most stations possible available to the drivers that use our EMSP service. Therefore, as an EMSP, we'll set up roaming agreements with other networks like EVgo, Electrify America, et cetera, which now allows our drivers to charge on their stations, and likewise, their drivers can come charge on ChargePoint stations. So there's a lot of mutual roaming agreements that we have in place with other CPOs that operate charging networks.
Okay, so you're integrated across the board, it sounds like, with a lot of the other networks.
Yeah, there's always more to do, especially in Europe. In Europe, it's way more sporadic. There's a lot more CPOs than you see here in North America. They're regional, they're country by country, city by city. So you end up with hundreds of CPOs that you would, prefer to integrate with as a roaming partner if you really want to give your drivers, maximum access to ports, where here in the U.S., it's far fewer.
Okay. Now, you had mentioned in an earlier podcast, because I do follow you, I have followed you, that you expected, I think you said this a few months ago, you expected to see at least a 28% growth in EVs in North America and at least maybe 33% in Europe. Is that meeting your expectations so far as you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's going to get interesting as the tax credit expires here in North America.
We talked about that earlier. Yes.
Yeah, so if you go, look at, all the data that's out there from whoever's publishing, J.D. Power, Perrin, U.S. government statistics, I think it's pretty consensus that EV growth in North America is in the 20-ish% range, or the EV charging market growth is in the 20-ish% range in North America. And in Europe, where you don't have the government headwinds that we have here, the growth is much faster, right? It's north of 30% for sure.
Okay.
So we're in a strange moment, though, with this EV tax credit about to expire. July, August, and September have been record sales months for EVs in the U.S., in anticipation of losing this tax credit, and thus the auto OEMs putting a lot of incentives in front of the buyers to clear the EV inventory before the tax break goes away, and they anticipate sales slowing down. So you can view that as bad news, but I'm thinking that there's some silver linings here where we're moving so many EVs into the market that the penetration goes up, and you get to this tipping point where theoretically it's around 10% of the market, adopts something new. Mm-hmm. That's a big enough percentage such that you now know somebody that's doing it, right? Somebody that drives an EV, you may have a chance to try an EV yourself. Mm-hmm. And for those of us that are EV drivers, I think I've never met anyone yet who's convinced that EVs aren't better products than internal combustion vehicles. So once you experience an EV, once you realize how inexpensive it is to operate, the fact that you hardly ever need to take it in for service, and that you can fuel it pretty inexpensively. At our place we provide charging for employees for free, right? So as long as I've driven an EV, I've never paid for fuel.
Oh, nice.
Right. So there's a lot of benefits to going to EV, but until you know someone that can tell you about it, like I just did,
yes,
you're hearing what you read in the news, which they don't have a long range. There's not enough chargers available. You might get stuck somewhere. They don't work so great in the super cold winters like here in Detroit.
Hard to find a charging station.
Whatever, right? So until you start to see people driving EVs successfully day in and day out, whether it's just going back and forth to work at the grocery store or taking a road trip that exceeds the range of their vehicle, you're going to maybe be apprehensive. So the fact that we're pushing so many EVs into the market here as we come up on this tax credit expiration, I think is good news. It's going to continue to move us to that tipping point where everybody in the country is going to know somebody that's got an EV. And, like I said, everybody I know that has an EV just loves them.
Yeah, we were also talking before this podcast that in this particular area, I have noticed an explosion of EV drivers out on the road, and it's pretty significant observation too as well. I always look for tailpipes or no tailpipes if I'm behind a vehicle, or a lack of a grill in the front of the vehicle if they happen to be behind me. So there's a lot more EVs out there, and charging stations are starting to proliferate too. Mm-hmm. So I want to talk a little bit about security of your units, I ran across something recently where you have cut-resistant cables.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work? Because I have happened across charging stations where the cables have been clipped. Not so much recently, but in the past, yes, I did. How do you manage that cut-resistant aspect?
Yeah, so that's a good question. This really pisses me off to see. We work so hard to design these stations and take such care in manufacturing, and then you put them in the ground and watch them get vandalized. It just really gets my ire up. So we got serious about trying to solve it, and it's really a combination on our stations of two things. One is the cut-resistant cables, and I'll come back to how we did that, combined with another feature, back to an example of our hardware having unique features that you can't get, for example, through some standard OCPP software protocol with a off-the-shelf third-party station. We have a feature called Sentry Mode. And what happens is we've got circuits running through the charging cable, and we can detect if one of those goes open because it's been cut. And then we can trigger the speakers and the LED lights very obnoxiously, not only on the station that was just victimized, but all of its neighbors. And you, as a manager of that network, can define what the neighbors are. Is it all the chargers in your parking lot? Is it all the chargers in your neighborhood? So as soon as they know that one guy has been cut, they all go into this obnoxious sentry mode. And the idea there is to scare the thief away.
Sure.
Back to our site in Campbell, we've had that whole site cut completely twice, the whole site. So if they're coming in for copper value, they're not taking one cable. They're taking the whole place.
A team of people.
Maybe, right? Or one guy or one person just going from charger to charger, chopping them, right? I've seen videos of people with their cars plugged in, sitting in the vehicle, charging, and the guy walks up behind, cuts the cable with current running through the cable. Sparks shoot 30 feet. He rips the cable out of the car, throws it in his trunk, drives off. I mean, it's really obnoxious. So we've got the sentry mode because the idea there is if they're going for the whole site, you want to scare them away before they get more than one. And then the other idea is to slow them down when they try on the first one, which is the cut-resistant cable. And what we did there is we embedded a bunch of material in the cable. It's pretty lightweight, and it doesn't increase the diameter of the cable or deteriorate the dexterity of the cable much, but it makes it just really hard to get through, especially with any kind of shearing device. And of all the videos we've seen, the vast majority of thieves are using some sort of shears to try and cut the cable. Now, you come at it with an angle grinder and a cutoff wheel or a saw, you might get through it. But it's going to ruin the blade pretty quickly, and it's going to take you longer. So if you're struggling to get one cable cut and sentry mode's going off, hopefully you're going to get out of there before you lose the value of the whole site full of cables.
So sentry mode is lights that come on and off, different colors. Do sirens also come on?
Yeah, it's blaring sirens and blinking lights.
Yeah,
for a whole group of stations that you, as the operator of that network, define what that group is.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good. Another thing I found interesting too is you have an Omni charger. Explain what that's all about.
Yeah, so we actually call it the Omniport.
Omniport.
And this is to make the transition from CCS1 to NACS a lot less painful.
How does that work?
So it's basic. I mean, you probably anybody who's out there who's got an EV has an adapter, right? I carry one around in my F-150 Lightning, right? And I've got a native CCS port on my truck, right? And I go to a Tesla supercharger station and I use my adapter to turn that NACS connector into a CCS1 connector that my truck will accept. So carrying that adapter around is a pain in the neck.
Yep.
People don't always have them, and we just decided it would be better to just integrate the adapter into the charger. So we call this Omniport, and it's integrated into basically all of our chargers now. And it's rolling out as we speak, and it can be retrofitted to chargers that have been put in the ground before we had this available. But it's basically an integrated adapter that's very seamlessly designed into the charger. And then if you're a ChargePoint EMSP customer, we know who you are. We know what kind of vehicle you drive. So when you come up and use your app to initiate a session, your cable comes out with the right connector because we know what vehicle you're in. Mm-hmm. If you're not, you're just coming up as what we call an ad hoc driver and tapping a credit card to pay. Then you just have to press a button on the screen that says, I want a CCS connector or NACS connector. And that's what comes out of the charger.
is that something that's inside the charger and then automatically integrates to the end of the cable?
So it's inside the charger, and it's very seamless. You can't really tell it's there, and it locks onto the cable itself, so it can't be stolen.
Okay.
Right. So if you're coming up with a Tesla, and most of our stations are all native CCS still, right? You'll come up and that adapter will come out and it'll be locked onto the end of the cable, and then you plug it into your car like you always would. You charge, and then you stick it back into the charger, and it locks itself into the charger. So when the next driver comes up, they get either CCS or NACS depending on what their car, what kind of port their car has.
So your Omni port, is there anything else like that on the market from your competitors?
No, it's all adapters. And again, the premise was the last thing we wanted to do was go tell our customers to guess how many CCS and NACS cars you're going to have your parking lot.
Yeah.
All we could guarantee is you'd get that ratio wrong, and it's going to change tomorrow. Right, as more and more cars show up with NACS, it's going to continue to move in that direction, and the CCS cars are going to continue to decline as a percentage of the population, and we just did not want our customers having to deal with cable swaps, which are expensive, or whatever the alternative is to try and get the ratio of ports to the cars correct.
Grandma comes up to charge in her own EV. She doesn't have to worry about an adapter.
Exactly.
I mean, how cool is that? I got to ask, how long did it take you guys to develop that?
Again, back to that year one, reimagining the product roadmap in addition to restructuring the company. Yeah, this is one of the roadmap items that came out of that year one roadmap reimagination.
Brainstorming sessions.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, okay. Same with the cut-resistant cable. Yeah. I actually was so pissed off about that problem. I was going home with charging cables and wrapping them and all kinds of things, and I was in my home workshop trying to cut them to come up with a solution because I was so infuriated by this.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember I had a friend who built high-end houses quite some time ago during the financial downturn, and he had to actually put security in his houses because the thieves would steal copper as high as they could reach with a 6-foot ladder if the drywall wasn't on yet.
Yeah, a long time ago in my career, copper theft isn't new, depending on the value of copper as a commodity. But we had a building back in the data networking days that was empty, and we were testing Wi-Fi in the building, and we wanted an empty building that was clean air, right? It didn't have competing Wi-Fi signals and a bunch of devices trying to connect.
Sure.
And so there weren't people there very often, right? Engineers would go and do a bunch of testing for a day, and then they'd leave it vacant for a week until they went back to test again. Well, I got a call from our security company that said, you got a problem at this building you leased. And what the thieves had done is they pulled up to the panel and they attached a winch to it and literally pulled the cable out of the building with a winch on the front of a truck.
Okay.
And you'd walk into the building and you'd see wall switches and outlets sucked into the walls as they tried to pull it all through the walls of the building. The damage was just intense. But, again, it's really sad to see this kind of stuff go on.
Absolutely. So you've set yourself up with your 3-year plan, and you've started to, deliver product out to the customer based on that. Where do you see yourself maybe in the year 2035?
Wow, I want to be, one of the biggest infrastructure solution providers in EV charging, be a global company serving all markets today. We're North America and Europe. I'd love to go beyond that at some point in the future, and really, help lead the industry in terms of decreasing the cost of EV charging, influencing the cost of energy, taking advantage of the energy that's in the battery of vehicles to alleviate stress on the grid in places where that's occurring. Mm-hmm. We're at the tip of the iceberg in terms of the amount of innovation that electrified transportation is going to catalyze. And there's just so much to do, so many things we haven't even thought of yet. It's bigger, more products, more innovation that reduces the cost of EV infrastructure as well as makes for greater driver experiences.
Okay, so your system also allows the end user to sell the power back to the grid, right?
So we're on the very, very infancy of that.
Okay.
So, you've got a couple of use cases again, right? Where the home is where it's been more commonly deployed, and in the vast majority of home, vehicle to X or vehicle to home, vehicle to grid use cases, the use case is powering your house when the power's out. Okay, so that's a solution that's out there today. It is expensive to install, and oftentimes just getting a charger in your home requires a panel upgrade, which is very expensive for a homeowner.
Oh, yeah.
So it just hasn't been cost effective enough, in my opinion, to really get traction. I'm a perfect example. I've got a home that was built in 1906 with 125 amp service, and I don't have a home charger. I charge at work, just because if I wanted to put a 50 amp charger on that service, what do I do with the rest of the loads in my house when I'm charging my vehicle? So, getting my utility to bring in a 200 amp service and then upgrade my whole main panel, oh man, it's a lot of hassle, a lot of money. I don't want to do that. So in partnership with Eaton, what we're trying to do is enable this whole vehicle to home thing to happen much more cost effectively by avoiding panel upgrades. And this is a good example of where the grid and EV charging work better together if we technically innovate together, as opposed to let's build the grid in a silo, let's build chargers in a silo, let's build EVs in silos, and then we plug the chargers into the grid, and then you plug the EVs into the chargers, and it can all kind of work. But the amount of innovation we can deliver if we collaborate across the grid, the chargers, and the vehicles is way greater than what we're going to do if we don't collaborate.
How about new home construction? Do you think they're building homes these days that have more power going into the home, greater than 200 amps?
Yeah, again, I don't keep track of what's going on countrywide in terms of service going into homes, but I would venture to guess that at least 200 amp service is going into most new homes.
For the homes that are in the country, with really not a whole lot around them, are there plans for your company to install chargers there somehow, some way? The farmer, Pete, 5 miles outside the city.
Yeah, I mean, again,
and his neighbors.
It's we provide the technology that allows people to provide charging services to their constituents, right? So when you talk to our customers, especially ones that are offering charging as a service where they're trying to make money selling electricity to EV drivers that need fuel, their utilization of the chargers is clearly a major factor for them when they decide where to put a charger.
Yeah.
And that is, has to do with location and the number of EVs on the road in that area. So if you start to get out into real rural areas and you're not going to have a ton of drivers charging every day, how do you make a business out of that?
Yeah.
Right? This is where the government can help, right? Where things like NEVI and some of the government incentives have allowed infrastructure to go in because it's subsidized, and that subsidization now starts to make the math pencil, for someone who's going to operate that charger as a business person. So, I think it's going to be a function of electrification. And if you use the example of the farm, I mean, I think you're already starting to see other farm equipment electrify, right? For the same beneficial reasons that you're seeing, vehicles that go on the road electrify. So as that demand increases due to, electric tractors, electric harvesters, and other equipment on farms that are going to need to charge, then there may be a business case to start to drive charging into more rural areas of the country.
I agree. You had mentioned Eaton a short time ago as a partner. Do you have any other partners you could mention to us? GM, I think, is one, right?
A big one, yeah. So again, I am very committed to technically innovating with the grid, and Eaton is the largest company in the world building the grid. And then on the other side of the equation, you've got the cars, right? So back to don't build the cars in a vacuum, in a silo, and the EV chargers in a silo in the grid. Let's work together.
Yeah.
So I'm spending a lot of time and very committed to building partnerships on the grid side, with Eaton being the one that we're working with. And then on the vehicle side, GM's a good example, right? Where we're collaborating with GM to make for better driver experiences by having the car intelligently work with the way the network performs.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a large Eaton facility in Battle Creek here in Michigan. Not sure what they do. So looking out, I asked you the question about where you think the business is, where you would like to take the business in 2035. How about new product introductions? We talked about your HomeFlex system that's obsolete, and you have a new one that you announced in Europe that's coming out to replace it. Are there any other products or services that maybe you have rolled out or might roll out soon that you could share?
So the HomeFlex is I guess I use the term obsolete because there's a new product that's going to replace, but that product's still available for people that want home chargers. Its new version is available in Europe now, and then we'll be bringing that to North America. And this is now part of the partnership with Eaton on vehicle to home.
Okay.
Right, where this charger is designed in a way where it can integrate with an Eaton smart panel or smart breaker. So now go back to my example of my 125 amp service into my 1906 home. Rather than do a service upgrade and replace the whole panel, I put a smart breaker into that panel that I have today that serves that charger, and I add a 50 amp load into my home on a smart breaker. But because that breaker's smart, it understands what's going on elsewhere in my home. And if I'm going to exceed the overall service to my home, it's going to dial down my EV charging. So now, all of a sudden, I'm able to get EV charging at home without paying for a panel upgrade, without paying for a service upgrade, by just installing a smart breaker into my panel. So this is a good example of collaborating with the grid,
yes,
in this case, what's happening in the panel, to lower the threshold of cost to get home charging and vehicle-to-home capabilities in place, across the country. Now, you go to the other extreme. This is what I'm really excited about. On DC fast charging, we announced a new DC architecture at RE Plus, big energy trade show with Eaton a couple of weeks ago in Las Vegas. And this product, it will become game-changing in one of its variants that requires collaboration or integration with the grid. So the way DC fast chargers work today is you plug them into the grid and you take AC off the grid and you convert it to DC in a power module, which they're often referred to. Then that DC voltage is converted to the DC voltage that the auto wants. Okay, so you've got AC to DC conversion and DC to DC conversion happening in a power module with a lot of relatively expensive power electronics. So not only are the parts expensive, but you've got efficiency losses as you convert from AC to DC and then DC voltage to a different DC voltage. Well, out there today, there are people building DC grids to power things. It's happening in data centers. It's happening in factories. Eaton builds DC grids. So what we did in this new charger is we separated the DC to DC conversion from the AC to DC conversion into separate modules. No one else does this. And by doing so, we've got an option to take all of the AC to DC conversion out of the cabinet and fill it up with DC to DC conversion. You now get a megawatt in a box that's smaller than any other DC power cabinet out there, and you hook it to a DC grid or a DC power grid that was built by Eaton, and you now not only have reduced the capital expenditure, you've dramatically increased the power in that aerial footprint. You've also improved the electrical efficiency of that system a lot. Based on our math, you can, compared to what's available today, as an operator of DC fast charging network for a fleet or cars on the road, you can reduce your cost of operations by 30%. You can reduce the capital expenditure of putting the system in by 30%, and you can do it with 30% less furniture on the lot. I mean, it really changes the game economically. And this one I'm really excited about for fleets, because fleets are very cost-centric. They're analyzing, can I deliver the goods or people less expensively with gas vehicles or electric vehicles? And this, in my opinion, completely tips the equation towards electrified transportation for delivery of fleets and of goods and people.
Game changer. Less footprint,
more power,
efficient, more power.
And more efficiency.
Money.
Yeah, you're losing less electricity to heat.
and good collaboration with another company.
Exactly, and we couldn't do this alone, right? Because there aren't DC grids sitting out there all over the place you can just plug chargers into. These are purpose-built.
You've done all this in 3 years?
We've done all this in 2 years, right?
2 years.
So we're in the midst of delivering all of it, right? Some of it's still yet to come out into the public and be available for sale, but it's been announced. It's coming.
Okay, you're going at plaid speed.
That is the key.
Yeah.
Anybody that's worked at ChargePoint and listened to me speak, well, I can assure you they know that the secret weapon for any business is speed.
Yes.
All else being equal, same market, same whatever, the company that goes the fastest without compromising quality ultimately wins. Mm-hmm. So I am a real student of how to make things go fast without cutting corners or compromising quality. It's the centerpiece of our culture. It's the centerpiece of our operating rhythm and how we work with one another. I fight bureaucracy tooth and nail because all that does is slow you down. But you're right, speed is a key competitive weapon for us, and we focus on optimizing for it all the time.
I tell you, this might be a good closing point based on what you just said. Unless you can think of anything else you might want to add to the audience, listening audience, go ahead. Otherwise, we'll wrap this up.
No, go ahead, John. That was a far-ranging conversation, and you covered a lot of cool stuff we're up to.
I love what you just said in closing, and I hope the audience takes that away to heart. You're right. You got to move in a plaid state. You got to fight bureaucracy, because companies that don't do that, they always wind up losing or coming into the game late, and then they wind up losing. So I wish you the best. I will keep you posted. I want you to keep me posted, please.
Sure.
I'd like to have a tour of your facility.
Yeah, bet. It's very cool to see it.
And make a video there as well. So, Rick, thank you very much for joining us for this Munro Live Podcast. And everybody else out there, thank you and goodbye.
Honored to be here. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.